Minister, I'll just put a number of questions and obviously I want to use my time to go over and back and put questions to you. I note your response to Deputy McGrath in relation to women returning from maternity leave being excluded from the wage subsidy scheme, and you said that this has been examined at the moment. I think the question the Deputy was putting was that was primary legislation necessary, and you said that you were getting advice on this matter. Can I put it to you, Minister, that on the 15th of April you announced that the subsidy would increase from 70% to 85% for a group of employees, despite the clear provisions of the legislation? I know my colleague Deputy Pearse Doherty wrote to you on the 20th of April and he sought legal advice as to how that change was made in the absence of legislation. And you said in your reply that you said you had asked Revenue to operate the scheme as if the legislation said 85% and not 70%, promising that the necessary change would be made to the legislation further down the line. So my direct question to you is that if you can use that mechanism to change the percentage from 70% to 85%, surely the same mechanism can be used by you instructing Revenue to deal with the issue for women on maternity. I think there is cross-party consensus in this chamber, Minister, including from your own party, that this is unacceptable, it's discriminatory and it needs to be sorted. So let's just sort it. Let's collectively sort it. So can you, again in reply, answer the direct question? If you've already used the mechanism to increase the percentage from 70–75%, can you not do exactly the same here for this group of women to get this issue sorted very quickly?
Minister.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Deputy, it was because of the legislation that I was able to make the change that I did in relation to the level of subsidy that would be available for participants on the wage subsidy scheme at different levels of income. But the decision that I made then, by offering guidance to the Revenue Commissioner, did not change the eligibility criteria for the scheme and did not change the number of people who are able to access the scheme and why. It influenced the rates for groups and for citizens that are already on the scheme. And if I could have given a clear answer to you, Deputy, regarding can we deal with this matter through administrative means, I would have given it to Deputy McGrath, who asked me the same question. And maybe you could tell me, Deputy, that if it does turn out that legislation is needed to deal with this issue, would you support the formation of a new government that you're not in to allow us to deal with this matter?
Deputy Cullinane.
Well, I don't think, with respect, smart aleck answers about government formation cuts us when we're dealing with women on maternity. To be quite fair, your party refuses to talk to mine. So let's just stop the nonsense. I've asked you a very straight question. You're the Minister for Finance. You have the officials at your disposal. I don't. You've been given advice. Deputy Pearse Doherty did a phone call with the Revenue Commissioners. They said they were examining this as well and they would work with your department. I'm only asking a fair question. Can this be resolved for the women? So don't be making politics about it, Minister, and coming back with glib responses. I asked you a fair question and I sought a fair response, and I think it's unacceptable that you politicised the response in the manner that you did. I want to move on to the issue of the PUP payment. That's also important for very significant numbers of people, because there is some speculation that that payment could be cut back at some point. I know that you have wrote to the Business Committee, Minister, requesting that the estimate for vote 37 be taken next week in the Dáil, and you said in writing to the Business Committee that you were going to take into account additional spending in the 12 weeks period and the additional money required to the end of the year. You also said you would take into account projections in relation to employment situation. So I have a number of straight questions for you again on this matter. How many people on the PUP payment do you expect to return to work over the next while? How many will be left on the PUP? And given that these people need certainty, they have all the same bills, all the same stresses that they had over the last number of weeks, I think it would be wise if that PUP payment stayed at the €350 until the end of the year. Of course, we want to get as many of those people back to work, and that will depend on the policy choices made, Minister, in relation to stimulus and investment, as was said earlier, rather than the path of austerity and cuts that was chosen before. But people do want that reassurance that their incomes will not be cut back and pared back, and can you give that commitment?
But before I answer the question, I'm going to respond back to the answer and to your assertion that I gave a moment ago. It sometimes seems to me that you think you're the only party that can make political points about anything. What I was saying to you was reaffirming what you heard from the Revenue Commissioner. It is my intention that all are treated equally by this legislation. I explained to you why this issue has developed, and I made clear my desire to see if there is a way of dealing with it. What I am doing appears to have been confirmed by the conversation that the Revenue Commissioner had with Deputy Doherty. I won't allow any allegation to be created around the development of this issue, that it is my intention to treat anybody in a way that is not fair or respectful. That is my intention. And that's why I'm examining this issue and see if there is a way of dealing with it. And I think it's perfectly appropriate for me to ask that if I turn out not be able to deal with this issue in the way I want, to ask for your cooperation in then dealing with the matter. Because I accept the concerns that have been raised in relation to this matter by deputies, and I'm simply examining to see if there's a way in which it can be dealt with. To answer your question regarding how many people we expect to be on the PUP at latter stages of the reopening plan, I'd say, Deputy, we'll probably be in a better position to answer that question with data for you next week. And the reason why I say that is even as recently as this morning, I did meet officials from the Department of Social Protection to see if we could get a sense of the number of recipients of the PUP who are leaving it at the moment. And unfortunately, we only have 2 days' worth of information at the moment, and I'd be very wary of drawing any conclusion from that. By the weekend or by Monday, we'll know how many people have left the PUP because of the reopening of the economy at that point. And I think at that point, Deputy, I'll be in a position to be able to give the House an informed estimate regarding what we think is happening with the level of numbers of citizens who are on the PUP and what we think is likely to happen as the economy reopens. In relation to the continuation of that payment, Deputy, throughout the rest of 2020, I understand that there's currently a timing difference between the end date of the PUP at the moment and where we are with the reopening of our economy at the moment. And the reason for that, as Deputy Cullinane, I hope, can appreciate, is we made the decision in relation to the phased reopening of our economy after we put the PUP payment in place. So government will have to look at that issue now across the coming weeks. And I hope to be, and as soon as the decision has been made on it, we'll of course update the House on it. I'll just briefly make a concluding point, if I may. If we were to be in a position that the PUP was to be continued at that level, for example, in the way you're suggesting, up to the end of this year, I think an understandable issue we would then face is citizens who were unemployed pre-COVID would then be asking why their job seekers payments are so lower than the current PUP payment. And I think we would all face demands then for an increase in that level of income support.
Thank you,
and I think that merits consideration.
Deputy Rose Conway-Walsh.